So we have a lot going on in this gospel, a lot of moving parts, a lot of contrasts too. We see what's happening at the beginning and what's happening at the end are kind of two very different things, and it seems intentional to me, because at the beginning, Jesus goes to his hometown. And he's confronted with he's not, hey, Jesus, come on in. I mean, they all like him, but then he starts doing these weird things that they don't recognize. He's not doing carpentry, and he's not just hanging out with his friends, his high school friends or whatever. He's doing all of these miracles and these healings. And they're like, wait a second. Who is this? You're James' brother and Mary's son, right? You're not familiar to me. What's going on? And before we get into that, I just parenthetically, I want to note that when Jesus heals people and says, go, your faith has healed you, we can see that he means that because the reverse is true too in the story. Go, your lack of faith has not healed you. Because we see all this cynicism and this doubt and their question, well, where is your authority coming from? And we don't want to accept this. And so Jesus' power to do good work is actually restrained. It's held back. He's like, I don't really have any power here. Obviously, he did a little bit because that's what got them all offended in the first place. But then he had to stop because he said, well, this is supposed to be a collaborative effort. This is teamwork. And that's something that's lost on us a lot of times when we read the story of Jesus, is that he is telling us over and over, it's supposed to be teamwork. I cannot use, my faith by itself will not heal you. Our faith together, our authority together, is what brings about these works and these miracles and these healings. Now, I just finished a book called The Healing Element, or The Human Element. This is an amazing book, just so full of insight about fuel versus friction and human persuasion and human interaction. And one of my big takeaways from that is called the familiarity bias. And it's all about how when humans are presented with two equally valid ideas or equally valid choices, we will almost always choose the one that feels more familiar to us. So if you're in a voting booth and you see there's two people running for like circuit judge or county commissioner or something, and the first name is like, yikes, I don't recognize this name at all. And the second name is like, oh wait, I think I saw that name somewhere, yard sign or something. People, by and large, choose that name. They don't know the first thing about either of them, but the name that looks familiar is the name that gets the vote. So they say familiarity breeds contempt, but I don't know if that's entirely true. In many cases, familiarity is like this comfort zone, this rut that we always skew toward. And we see this at work in more than one of our scriptures this morning. We see in the first reading, the first lesson, they said, we are your, what does it say? We are your blood and your bone, or your flesh and your bone. To David, they say, look, we are your bone and flesh. They're making an appeal to familiarity, in other words, to family. Familiarity is the thing that's like family, the thing that we skew toward when we don't really know what else to do. But then we see it at work in the gospel where Jesus is in front of his actual family and these people who are like family to him. And they have found all of a sudden they have to make a choice. They see two Jesuses. There's the Jesus in their head, the one that's comfortable and familiar, and the one who might make him a little thing out of wood or whatever, or just hang out and go to weddings. And that was the comfortable, familiar Jesus. But that's not the Jesus that they were being confronted with. This Jesus is different than that one. And which one am I going to follow? Which one am I going to accept? Because this one is difficult. Doing great things, yeah, but I don't get it. There's a disconnect. Now, I just finished that book. Another thing I just finished is the 4th season of The Chosen. And some of us have conversations about The Chosen, the TV series. TheChosen.tv. You can go and watch it for free if you want. But it's this depiction of the story of Jesus and his disciples, and it's really, really well done. And as I finished that, I was thinking about the disciples and the journey they've taken, and I was remembering this one episode, actually this one scene from a season or two ago, where Jesus sends the disciples out 2 by 2, just like we read in the gospel, and said, look, I am giving you authority to go out and do all the things that I've been doing. In case you haven't picked up yet, the teamwork thing, right? I'm going to make a point of giving you this experience. Go out 2 by 2. And The Chosen really shows this in beautiful. They put it in black and white, which is an interesting artistic choice. And we're watching them, and we're just kind of seeing from a distance being paired up and going out and casting out these demons and healing these diseases. And it's working, and as it's working, they're like blown away. So like, here, yes, let me pray for you to be healed. And, oh man, you just got healed. That was weird. They can't even really get their heads around it, that this is happening through them. So they have this whole missionary journey that they take together. And eventually then they come back. They circle back to Jesus, and they're back to following him, the 12, again. But then they fall back into all the same ruts as before. They fall back into their bickering amongst one another, into all their insecurities or their little conundrums, or like, is he really or is he not? And I'm watching this drama unfold, and I just want to grab him by the collar. I want to shout at the screen and say, you have him right there with you. You have a question, ask him. You have an issue, talk to him. He tells you to do something weird, just do it. Don't you know you're a Bible character? Like, don't you know what's going on here? Like, everything you say and do is going to be talked about in church for centuries and preached about ad nauseum, and literally thousands of seminary papers are going to be written about that, how you respond to that. I'm like, would you please get your act together? But that lacks empathy. I mean, I have these 2,000 years to look back on their encounters with Jesus and say, duh, this should be easy. You are one of the 12, and Jesus is there with you physically. So to watch them struggle, if I have empathy, then I know that I'm no different. Whatever seems like it should be easy for them, shouldn't it be easy for me? Look at all the time that we've had. We get angry at them for forgetting what Jesus had just done. Remember the water and the wine? Remember the little girl being raised from the dead? We read about that last week. Remember the healing after healing after healing, the blind people seeing, the lame people walking. Do you forget? Not only did you see him do it, you did it yourself. And you forget. Are you going to act like his hometown friends? And like his brothers and sisters who are cynical and constantly asking him to prove his authority? Where are you getting this authority from? Or are you going to remember what he just did in you, through you, and to all those other people? And I forget too. None of what Jesus is doing here makes sense. None of what he did in his hometown made sense to them, and we have the same choice to make. Because we also have two Jesuses. We have a comfortable, familiar Jesus, and we know what a church looks like and an altar, and you know what to expect when you come up for communion. There's going to be bread, and there's going to be wine, the body and the blood. And we get it. We have the prayers, we have the songs. We sang Amazing Grace. How comfortable is that? And it's amazing and challenging if you enter in. But it's also that familiar comfort zone that we can settle in and we can choose that Jesus, when Jesus is actually over here calling you out of that. Saying that you can make that choice that the disciples made when I sent them out with no money, with only the shoes on their feet and the belt tied around their waist, and said, don't wear 2 tunics, as if you got sort of a spare here that you're ready. Jesus said, you can operate from a foundation of trust when you remember who I am and what I literally just did. And so when we make that choice here, what does that look like? First of all, maybe it means we don't worry constantly. That we're not always trying to strategize about what tomorrow is going to look like and how can we twist and configure our plans and our activities today to make sure we have a tomorrow. And maybe it means when we operate from a foundation of trust, we are not taking out an insurance policy on every little aspect of our lives. Insurance is good. I'm not anti-insurance. But how far do we go in thinking about each aspect of our lives and like, well, what if that goes away and what if that goes away? And do I have a contingency plan for this emergency and for that emergency? Emergency preparedness is good. I'm not anti-preparedness. We're going to talk about that later. But at what point do we shift from trust into worry? From trusting God into thinking it is all up to me and I better get it together if I'm going to survive? Maybe we don't need that extra tunic. Maybe we don't need a stash of money just in case. I sound a little bit crazy right now, right? Like he's gone completely off his rocker, but I'm trying to play it as it lays. I'm trying to see what Jesus is actually showing us to do, and in the process, remembering what he has done in us already. Look around this church. Did you expect any of this a year ago? I absolutely did not. And yet, I forget it like that as soon as I start to worry about tomorrow. Yeah, I'm being a little crazy. Paul's a little crazy when he says, I boast in my weaknesses. That's nuts. That doesn't make any sense. I boast in my weaknesses? But honestly, I've spent my whole life trying not to look crazy. And frankly, I don't think it's working out. It's like that bumper sticker. I don't suffer from insanity. I enjoy every minute of it. If we were just trying to be sane, if we were just trying to be reasonable, we would not be here. Then none of this makes any sense. So if we're going to be crazy, let's lean into that, right? There's no such thing as normal, it turns out. So maybe we should stop looking for it and just shake that dust off our feet and lean into this crazy that Jesus is handing us. And if we're going to be crazy, let's be crazy for a reason. Let's be crazy in order to come together and bring healing to this city, to people suffering from mental illness and physical illness, to bring reconciliation, to restore relationships, to bring justice, kindness, and mercy. We've tried all the normal ways to do that, and it's not working out. And Jesus sees that in us. And he's calling us out of that place of worry and strategy and insurance policy and emergency contingencies and all of our administrative brilliance. It's calling us into a place of trust. Amen.